The moment I realized my husband of 15 years had emptied our joint accounts, I felt my world collapse. 20 years of careful saving, planning for our retirement, our daughter's college fund, gone. All of it transferred to someone named Veronica Walsh, a woman I'd never heard of until that moment. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and hit that like button. Your support helps me continue creating content just like this. Thank you for being part of this journey. I stared at the bank statement in disbelief, the black and white numbers swimming before my eyes. 342,567 withdrawn, every penny we had. The statement fell from my trembling fingers as I sank to the kitchen floor, my back against the refrigerator, where Emma's kindergarten drawings still hung with alphabet magnets. How would I tell our daughter that Daddy had stolen her future? My name is Claire Bennett, and this is the story of how I lost everything, and then got it all back through a plan so audacious that even now, 3 years later, I can hardly believe I pulled it off. Chapter 1. The betrayal Robert had been. Distant for months, working late, business trips that stretched from weekends to full weeks, the occasional lipstick smudge on his collar that he explained away as paint from an office renovation. Classic signs that I willfully ignored, telling myself that after 15 years of marriage, we were just going through a phase. But there was no ignoring this bank statement. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from our financial advisor, Jacob. With shaking hands, I called him back. "Claire, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all morning." Jacob's voice was tense. "There's been some unusual activity on your accounts. Large withdrawals." "I know," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I expected. "Robert took everything." A pause. "Not quite everything. He couldn't access your personal account, the one with your inheritance from your grandmother. It's only about $30,000. But it's something." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. My grandmother's parting gift, the money I'd kept separate, because she'd made me promise to use it for something that brings you joy, not just responsibility. I'd almost forgotten about it. "Claire, you need to call the police. This is theft." "He's my husband, Jacob. We have a joint account. Not the retirement accounts. Not Emma's 529 plan. Those required both signatures to liquidate. He forged yours." The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated fraud. "I need to find him first," I said, my mind already racing. "Before I go to the police, I need to understand why." After hanging up, I sat at our kitchen island and opened my laptop. Robert wasn't answering his phone, but I knew his passwords. He'd always been careless with them, reusing the same combination of Emma's birthday and our wedding anniversary for everything. I logged into his email first. Nothing suspicious in his inbox. But when I checked his recently deleted items, I found dozens of emails between him and V. Flight confirmations to Bali. Property inquiries for villas in Indonesia. Discussion of starting fresh where no one knows us. My stomach churned as I pieced together the truth. Robert and his lover weren't just having an affair. They were planning to disappear with our life savings to a country with complicated extradition laws. Next, I checked his browsing history. He'd searched for countries with no extradition to US and how to change identity overseas. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated escape. I was still sitting there, numb with shock, when Emma came bounding through the front door, after her play date at a neighbor's house. "Mommy, where's Daddy? He promised to take me for ice cream today." I forced a smile. "Daddy had to go on a sudden business trip, sweetheart. But how about you and I get ice cream instead?" As I watched my 6-year-old daughter happily lick her chocolate cone an hour later, rainbow sprinkles dotting her cheeks, I made a decision. Robert hadn't just stolen from me. He'd stolen from Emma, and I was going to get her future back. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. After tucking Emma into bed that night, I called my college roommate, Diane, who had become a successful private investigator. "I need information on someone named Veronica Walsh," I told her after explaining my situation. "And I need to know where Robert is planning to go." "Jesus, Claire, I'm so sorry." Diane's voice softened. "I'll do everything I can. Send me what you have so far." Over the next 3 days, while telling Emma that Daddy was still on his business trip, I lived in a strange limbo. I went to work at the library where I'd been head of research services for 12 years. I made Emma's lunches and checked her homework. I smiled at neighbors and colleagues. And at night, I planned. Diane's information came through piece by piece. Veronica Walsh, 29, former administrative assistant at Robert's law firm. Resigned 3 weeks ago. No criminal record, but several maxed-out credit cards and a bankruptcy filing 2 years prior. She'd recently closed her social media accounts, but Diane had managed to recover cached versions showing a woman with gleaming red hair and the kind of beauty that came from expensive treatments rather than genetics. Most importantly, Diane discovered that Robert and Veronica had booked passage on a private yacht leaving from a marina in Miami in exactly 6 days, bound for international waters and eventually Indonesia. "He's liquidating your assets and converting them to cryptocurrency," Diane explained. "Harder to trace once it leaves the country. Claire, you need to go to the police now." But something held me back. The police would freeze assets, start an investigation, and Robert would likely flee immediately, taking what he could. We might never recover the full amount, and the scandal would follow Emma for years in our small Connecticut town. No, I needed a different approach. Something that would give Robert exactly what he deserved while recovering every penny he'd stolen. That's when I remembered something from my research work at the library. A year ago, I'd helped a psychology professor find resources on the concept of social engineering, essentially the art of manipulating people into divulging confidential information or taking specific actions. I'd become fascinated with the topic and had read everything I could find. The key insight: the most successful scammers don't rely on complex technical hacks. They exploit human psychology, greed, fear, vanity. I knew Robert better than anyone. I knew his weaknesses, his insecurities, his dreams, and his greatest flaw: he always underestimated me. The perfect plan began to take shape in my mind, a plan that would require me to become someone else entirely. Someone cunning, calculating, and completely ruthless. Someone like Robert. Chapter 2. The Preparation. I started my preparations the next morning. First, I called in sick to work, something I'd rarely done in my 12 years at the library. Then I asked my parents to take Emma for a few days, claiming Robert and I needed time to work through some marital issues. "Is everything all right, dear?" My mother's voice was heavy with concern. "It will be," I assured her, with more confidence than I felt. "I just need some space to figure things out." With Emma safely away, I turned our guest bedroom into my war room. I taped every piece of information I had about Robert, Veronica, and their escape plan to the walls. Timeline, bank statements, email printouts, property inquiries in Bali. Then I made a list of what I needed. 1. Access to Robert's current location and movements. 2. A way to communicate with him without raising suspicion. A convincing reason. For him to transfer the money back. 4. Insurance in case everything went wrong. For the first item, I already had a solution. 2 Christmases ago, I'd given Robert an expensive smartwatch. Like most tech-obsessed men, he'd spent hours configuring it, linking it to his phone, our smart home system, and his various accounts. What he didn't know was that I had set up the initial family sharing features, which included location tracking. He'd never bothered to disable it. Opening my laptop, I logged into the tracking app. A small blue dot pulsed on the screen. Miami, Florida. Specifically, the Royal Palm Hotel. My heart raced as I zoomed in. He was really there, preparing for his escape with her. For my second requirement, communication without suspicion, I needed a new identity. Robert wouldn't respond to me as his wife, but he might respond to a stranger with valuable information. I created a new email address under the name Alex Morgan and a corresponding social media profile. A simple backstory: a private intelligence operative who specialized in financial security for high-net-worth individuals. The kind of person Robert would respect and fear in equal measure. For the third element, a reason for him to transfer the money back, I needed a trap so tempting that Robert wouldn't be able to resist, even if he suspected something wasn't quite right. And for that, I needed to understand exactly what Robert and Veronica's vulnerabilities were. I spent hours analyzing their emails and search histories. Two key insights emerged. Robert was paranoid about being caught before leaving the country, and Veronica was obsessed with ensuring their new life would be luxurious, not just comfortable. But the most useful discovery came when I found Robert's cloud storage password and uncovered a folder of documents he hadn't deleted. Among them was a draft of a new will, leaving everything to Veronica under her soon-to-be new identity, Victoria Bennett. They weren't just running away, they were planning to create entirely new lives. This was my leverage. Identity creation required specific expertise I could claim to have as Alex Morgan. For my final requirement, insurance if everything went wrong. I reached out to an old friend from library school who had become a forensic accountant. "Melissa, I need a favor," I explained after swearing her to secrecy. "I need to understand exactly how someone would move money internationally without being caught, and then I need to know how to prevent it." Melissa's expertise proved invaluable. By the end of our 3-hour call, I understood exactly how Robert planned to move the money, and more importantly, how to track it if my plan failed, and I needed to involve authorities. With my preparations in place, it was time to make contact. I crafted an email from Alex Morgan to Robert. Subject: Your Indonesian arrangements, security concern. Mr. Bennett. My name is Alex Morgan. I provide security consultation for high-net-worth individuals making significant life transitions. One of my clients at the Royal Palm has mentioned your name in connection with certain arrangements in Indonesia. I have information regarding a security vulnerability in your current plans that could jeopardize both your assets and your future security. This is not an attempt at extortion, merely a professional courtesy between parties with mutual interests. If you wish to discuss this matter, please respond to this email with a contact number. Time is of the essence. Regards, Alex Morgan. Singularity Risk Management. I read the email a dozen times before hitting send. It needed to be professional yet vague, threatening enough to demand attention, but not so alarming that Robert would simply flee immediately. While waiting for a response, I prepared for the next phase. I purchased a burner phone with cash. I withdrew my grandmother's inheritance and converted half to cryptocurrency, following Melissa's instructions for creating a secure digital wallet. I booked a flight to Miami for the following day. 4 hours after sending the email, my phone pinged with a notification. Robert had responded, "This is a private number. Who gave you my information? I don't know what arrangements you're referring to." Classic Robert, defensive but curious. I had him. "Mr. Bennett, I understand your caution. My client list is confidential, as I'm sure you appreciate. What matters is that your current method of asset transfer has been flagged in multiple systems. The encryption protocol you're using for the cryptocurrency conversion leaves a traceable signature. In simpler terms, you're leaving breadcrumbs. I've dealt with similar situations for other clients. The solution isn't complicated, but it does require immediate attention. My fee is 5% of the protected assets. Consider this. The cost of my services versus the cost of starting over with nothing if your current plans are compromised. I'll be at the Marina View Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. if you wish to discuss in person. Come alone. Am. Then I waited. Robert was smart enough to be suspicious, but also arrogant enough to believe he could handle any situation. Would his paranoia or his confidence win out? An hour later, I had my answer. I'll be there. How will I recognize you? I'll recognize you, I replied. That night, I barely slept. I ran through every scenario, every possible way my plan could fail. Robert might bring Veronica. He might contact the actual security firm I'd invented. He might simply not show up. But I had to try. For Emma, for my own dignity. And perhaps most importantly, to show Robert that I wasn't the naive, trusting wife he thought he could discard so easily. The next morning, I stood before my bathroom mirror, preparing my disguise. I'd purchased a sleek blonde wig, colored contact, lenses that turned my brown eyes blue, and makeup techniques I'd studied from YouTube tutorials to subtly alter the shape of my face. Professional attire, a sharp black pantsuit I'd never wear in real life, completed the transformation. The stranger looking back at me wasn't Claire Bennett, librarian and mother. She was Alex Morgan, confident, calculating, and completely in control. I took a deep breath and whispered to my reflection, "He took everything from us. Now we take it back." Chapter 3. The Confrontation. Miami in July was oppressively hot, the air thick with humidity as I made my way from my hotel to the Marina View Cafe. I'd arrived the previous night, checked into a small boutique hotel far from the Royal Palm where Robert was staying, and spent the evening rehearsing my performance. The cafe sat on a deck overlooking the marina, where, according to Diane's information, Robert and Veronica's escape yacht was docked. I arrived an hour early, selected a table with a clear view of the entrance but partially obscured by a large potted palm, and ordered an iced tea. Then I waited, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain everyone around me could hear it. At precisely 1:58 p.m., Robert walked in. He looked tanned and relaxed in linen pants and a blue button-down shirt that I'd given him for his birthday. The sight of him, so carefree after destroying our family, sent a surge of anger through me that I quickly suppressed. Alex Morgan wouldn't be emotional. She would be calculating. I watched as Robert scanned the cafe, looking for someone who might be his mysterious contact. After a moment of hesitation, he took a seat at a table near the window, his back to the wall, facing the entrance. Classic Robert, always positioning himself to see any potential threats. I waited until he checked his watch for the third time, noting with satisfaction the growing tension in his shoulders as 2:15 p.m. approached with no sign of his contact. Then I stood, smoothed my jacket, and approached his table. "Mr. Bennett," I said, pitching my voice slightly lower than normal and adopting the faint hint of a British accent I'd practiced for hours. "Thank you for meeting me." Robert looked up, his eyes scanning my face without a flicker of recognition. My disguise was working. "Ms. Morgan?" he asked, standing to shake my hand. "Please call me Alex," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "I appreciate your discretion in coming alone." "Your email was concerning," Robert said, studying me with the careful assessment he used on opposing counsel. "You mentioned a security vulnerability?" I placed my sleek leather portfolio on the table, extracted a tablet, and pulled up a series of complex-looking financial charts I'd prepared. "Your current method of asset conversion is leaving digital footprints," I explained, turning the tablet toward him. "These patterns here? They're algorithmic signatures created by the particular exchange you're using, easily traceable by authorities with the right tools." The charts were actually randomized data visualizations I'd created, meaningless to anyone with real expertise. But they looked impressive, and I was counting on Robert's limited understanding of cryptocurrency to sell the deception. "How did you know I was converting assets?" Robert asked, suspicion edging his voice. I gave him a thin smile. "Mr. Bennett, it's my job to know. I specialize in helping clients like yourself make clean transitions to new lives. Your methods aren't as unique as you might think." I paused, letting that sink in. "The question isn't how I know. The question is, do you want my help ensuring that what happened to the Larsons doesn't happen to you?" "The Larsons?" Robert's brow furrowed. "Martin and Eliza Larson attempted a similar exit strategy 3 months ago. They made it as far as Singapore before their assets were frozen and they were extradited. They're currently awaiting trial in Massachusetts." I delivered this completely fictional case with perfect confidence. Robert paled slightly. "I've taken precautions, standard precautions," I interrupted smoothly. "The same ones everyone takes, which is why they fail." I could see the internal struggle playing out on Robert's face, skepticism warring with fear. I needed to push harder. "Mr. Bennett, I understand your hesitation. You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. But consider this. I approached you. I identified the weaknesses in your plan. And I'm offering a solution that frankly costs me more time than the fee is worth." "Why would you do that?" Robert asked. "Because your case interests me," I replied. "And because my client at the Royal Palm speaks highly of your legal work. Consider this an investment in a potential long-term professional relationship." I closed my tablet and stood. "I'll give you time to consider. If you're interested, I'll need access to your current conversion protocols to implement the necessary security measures. My card." I placed a business card on the table, simple white cardstock with just a name, email address, and phone number, the burner phone. "I'm leaving for Singapore tomorrow evening," I added. "If I don't hear from you by noon, I'll assume you're declining my services." I walked away without looking back, forcing myself to maintain Alex Morgan's confident stride. Once outside the cafe, I turned the corner and leaned against a wall, my heart racing. He hadn't recognized me. The first part of my plan had worked, but would he take the bait? I waited in my hotel room, alternating between pacing and sitting, rigid on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone. 3 hours after our meeting, it finally rang. "Alex Morgan," I answered, keeping my voice cool and professional. "It's Robert Bennett," he said. "I've been thinking about your offer." "And?" "I'm interested, but I need more details. Exactly what would you need access to, and what guarantees can you provide?" I explained the process I'd invented, a complex-sounding series of encryption overlays and ledger masking protocols that would supposedly make his money transfers untraceable. In reality, my plan was much simpler. I would gain access to his cryptocurrency wallets, transfer the funds back to accounts I controlled, and disappear. "I'll need remote access to your current wallets to implement the security protocols," I told him. "And I'll need it soon. These vulnerabilities are time-sensitive." "That's a significant request," Robert said carefully. "It is," I agreed. "And if you're not comfortable with it, that's entirely understandable. As I said, this is a professional courtesy, not a hard sell. There are other clients who value my expertise." The implied suggestion that he might not be clever enough to recognize the value of my services was perfectly calibrated for Robert's ego. "No, I'm interested," he said quickly, "but I'll need some verification of your credentials first." I smiled to myself. This was exactly where I wanted him. "Of course. I've just sent you an email with testimonials from previous clients. Names. Redacted for privacy, naturally. You'll also find a detailed explanation of the vulnerability I've identified in your specific conversion method." The email I'd prepared contained fabricated testimonials and a technical explanation cobbled together from various cryptocurrency forums, just convincing enough to pass a layman's inspection. "Review those materials," I continued. "If you're Satisfied, we can proceed tomorrow morning. Time is of the essence, Mr. Bennett. I'll be in touch, Robert said and hung up. The next few hours were excruciating. I ordered room service but couldn't eat. I tried to distract myself with television but couldn't focus on anything except the silent phone beside me. Finally, at 11:42 p.m., a text message. I've reviewed your materials. Let's proceed. When and where? My hotel, 8 a.m. I'll text you the details in the morning, I replied. I spent the night making final preparations. I set up my laptop with a series of impressive-looking programs, actually just visualization tools with custom interfaces I'd designed to look like sophisticated financial software. I prepared the digital wallet where Robert would believe his money was being transferred for encryption, but which would actually route the funds back to accounts I controlled. At 7:30 a.m., I texted Robert the hotel information. At precisely 8 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I took a deep breath, checked my disguise one last time, and opened the door to my husband. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," I said, ushering him in. "I appreciate your punctuality." Robert entered cautiously, surveying the hotel room with its array of technical equipment I'd carefully arranged: 2 laptops, multiple external drives, and a complex-looking device that was actually just a router with extra lights I'd added. "Impressive setup," he commented, taking the seat I indicated at the small desk. "Necessary for what we're doing," I replied, sitting beside him and opening my primary laptop. "Now, I'll need access to your current wallets." Robert hesitated, his lawyer's caution finally asserting itself. "Before I provide that, I'd like to understand exactly what you'll be doing." I launched into a detailed technical explanation, using enough real cryptocurrency terminology to sound legitimate while being essentially meaningless, a verbal version of the charts I'd shown him earlier. "And that's why the double encryption method I'm proposing will make your assets invisible to standard blockchain analysis," I concluded. Robert nodded, trying to look like he'd followed every word. "And your fee?" 5%, as discussed. Payable after you've verified the security of the transfer. That was the hook. I wasn't asking for payment up front. In Robert's mind, this reduced his risk. If my security measures didn't work, he wouldn't pay me. What he didn't realize was that I had no intention of collecting that fee. "All right," he said finally. "Let's proceed." Robert logged into his cryptocurrency wallets on my laptop. I watched carefully as he entered passwords and authentication codes, memorizing every detail. The balances appeared on screen: Bitcoin, Ethereum, and several other cryptocurrencies, totaling approximately $340,000, almost our entire life savings. "Perfect," I said, trying to keep the emotion from my voice. "Now, I'll need to run my security protocol. This will take about 30 minutes. The program will create a secure transfer pathway for your assets." I turned the laptop so Robert could see the screen and launched one of my visualization programs. Complex patterns began flowing across the screen, meaningless but impressive. "This is analyzing the current blockchain vulnerabilities," I explained. "While it works, let's talk about your exit strategy. Indonesia, correct?" Robert's eyes narrowed. "How did you—" "As I mentioned, it's my job to know," I interrupted smoothly. "Bali is a popular choice. Beautiful, relatively affordable, limited extradition enforcement. The villa market in Ubud is particularly attractive right now." "We've been looking in that area," Robert admitted, relaxing slightly. "Smart choice. Now, regarding your new identities, that's another area where I might be able to offer some value-added service. This was the next phase of my plan, keeping Robert engaged and trusting while the transfer program supposedly ran. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Your current documentation, is it standard black market or premium?" I asked casually. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "I have arrangements in place. Let me guess. New passports, driver's licenses, basic background documentation. Probably costing you around $30,000 per identity. Robert's surprised expression confirmed my guess. It's standard, I continued, but also the first thing authorities look for. Those documents all come from the same 5 or 6 sources, all with recognizable markers to experienced investigators. I pulled out a folder from my briefcase and slid it across the table. Inside were sample identity documents I'd mocked up: passports, driver's licenses, credit cards, all with sophisticated security features I'd carefully photographed from my own legitimate documents. This is premium work, I said as Robert examined them with growing interest. Authenticated through actual government channels using proprietary methods, essentially invisible. And you provide this service as well? Robert asked, clearly intrigued. For select clients, yes. It would be a separate engagement with separate fees, of course. I was building layer upon layer of deception, creating a comprehensive service that appealed to everything Robert wanted: security, luxury, and the thrill of beating the system. I might be interested, he said, setting down the folder, depending on how this goes. Of course, I replied. One step at a time. My laptop emitted a series of beeps, a sound effect I'd programmed to signal the completion of the supposed security protocol. Excellent, I said, turning the screen back toward me. The security pathway is established. Now we need to execute the transfer to the secure wallet. This is temporary, just a holding place while the encryption is applied. Once complete, you'll transfer the funds to your final destination wallet. This was the most critical moment. I needed Robert to authorize the transfer of all his cryptocurrency to what he believed was a security wallet, but was actually my own. You want me to transfer everything? Robert asked, suddenly wary. The security protocol only works on complete wallets, I explained patiently. Fragmenting the assets would create vulnerability gaps, but if you're uncomfortable, we can certainly abort the process. I began closing programs, giving the impression I was ready to end our session. No, Robert said quickly. It's fine. Let's continue. I reopened the programs and navigated to the transfer screen. You'll need to authorize the transfer to this secure wallet address, I said, displaying the address of my own cryptocurrency wallet on the screen. Robert hesitated, only briefly before entering his authorization codes. On the screen, we watched as the transfer initiated. 3 minutes later, it was complete. Every cent of our stolen savings was now in my control. I kept my expression professionally neutral as I turned to Robert. Excellent. The funds are now in the secure holding wallet. The encryption protocol will complete within 24 hours, at which point you'll receive transfer instructions to move the assets to your final destination wallet. 24 hours? Robert frowned. I was hoping to complete this today. Security takes time, Mr. Bennett, I said firmly. Rushing is how mistakes happen. The encryption needs to propagate through the blockchain to be effective. I closed my laptop definitively. I'll contact you tomorrow with the final instructions. In the meantime, I suggest you consider my premium identity service. It would be efficient to implement both security upgrades simultaneously. Robert stood, clearly not entirely satisfied, but having little choice now that the transfer was complete. All right, I'll expect your call tomorrow. One last thing, I said, walking him to the door. It's vital that you don't attempt any blockchain transactions for the next 24 hours. It could interfere with the encryption process and potentially flag the very systems we're trying to avoid. Understood. Robert nodded. No transactions until I hear from you. After he left, I stood motionless in the center of the hotel room, hardly daring to breathe. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. All our money was now back under my control, but I wasn't finished yet. There was one more act to this performance. The most satisfying one. Chapter 4. The Revelation. I waited until I was certain Robert had left the hotel before packing up my equipment. My hands trembled slightly as I secured the funds in multiple cryptocurrency wallets. following Melissa's instructions exactly. Then I checked out, took a taxi to a different hotel across the city, and registered under a third name with a different disguise, a short brown wig and glasses. For the next several hours, I monitored the cryptocurrency addresses. As expected, there were multiple attempts to reverse or trace the transactions, Robert trying to recover the funds once he inevitably grew suspicious. But Melissa's security measures held firm. The money was safely out of his reach. As evening approached, I prepared for the final confrontation. I removed my disguise, letting my natural brown hair fall around my shoulders. I changed into my own clothes, jeans and a simple blouse that Claire Bennett would wear. I washed away the contouring makeup that had subtly altered my facial structure. Then I called Robert from my regular phone. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Claire, what is it?" "We need to talk," I said simply. "I'm in Miami." A long pause. "Miami? What are you—" "I know everything, Robert," I interrupted. "About Veronica, about the money, about your plans to leave the country." Another pause, longer this time. "Claire, I can explain." "I'm at the Bayside Park near the marina," I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "I'm alone. This is your chance to explain yourself before I go to the police." I hung up before he could respond. Then I made my way to the park, a small, well-lit area near the marina where Robert and Veronica's escape yacht was docked. I chose a bench with clear sightlines in all directions, well-populated with evening strollers nearby. Safe, but private enough for conversation. 20 minutes later, Robert appeared, looking harried and confused. When he spotted me, he approached cautiously, as if I might suddenly lunge at him. "Claire," he began, sitting beside me but maintaining his distance. "This isn't what you think." "Isn't it?" I asked calmly. "You've been having an affair with Veronica Walsh for the past 8 months. 3 weeks ago you liquidated our joint accounts, retirement funds, and Emma's college fund, a total of $342,567. You forged my signature on several documents, and you were planning to leave the country tomorrow on a yacht currently docked in this marina, bound for Indonesia where you intended to live under new identities." Robert's face drained of color. "How did you know all that?" I finished for him. "I'm not as oblivious as you thought, Robert. But that's not why I'm here." "Why are you here?" he asked warily. "To tell you that your plan has failed," I said simply. "The money is gone." Robert's expression shifted from wariness to confusion. "What are you talking about? What money?" "The cryptocurrency," I clarified. "The Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of it. It's been transferred to secure wallets that you cannot access." Robert stared at me, realization slowly dawning. That's not possible. I just met with—" His eyes widened as he finally made the connection. "No, that wasn't— you weren't—" "Alex Morgan?" I supplied, allowing myself a small smile. "Security specialist?" "Yes, that was me." Robert stood abruptly, his face contorting with anger. "You stole my money." "I recovered our money," I corrected calmly. "Money you stole first. The difference is that what I did wasn't illegal. The accounts were joint assets. The retirement funds and Emma's college fund that you liquidated through forgery, those I've already reported to the authorities." You can't prove anything," Robert sputtered. "Actually, I can," I replied, opening my purse and removing a USB drive. "This contains every email between you and Veronica. Documentation of every forged signature, evidence of the identity fraud you were planning." I held it out to him. After a moment of hesitation, he snatched it from my hand. "Keep it," I said. "It's a copy. The originals are with my attorney, with instructions to send them to the police if anything happens to me, or if any further attempts are made to access our accounts." Robert sank back onto the bench, the USB drive clutched in his hand. "What do you want?" he asked hoarsely. "A divorce," I replied simply. I've already filed the papers. Your girlfriend can keep the yacht and whatever cash you have left. I'll keep our house and the recovered funds. And you will stay away from Emma unless you're sober, stable, and paying child support. Those are my terms. And if I refuse? Then everything goes to the police, I said. You'll face charges for forgery, fraud, and attempted identity theft. Your law career will be over, and you'll still lose everything. Robert stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. I never thought you were capable of something like this. That was your mistake, I said, standing to leave. You never really knew me at all. I walked away without looking back, my heart lighter than it had been in months. There would be challenges ahead, explaining to Emma why her father had left, rebuilding our lives, learning to trust again. But for the first time since discovering the empty bank accounts, I felt confident that we would be okay. 2 days later, back in Connecticut, I received a package by courier. Inside was the signed divorce agreement and a letter. Claire, you win. The papers are signed. I won't contest anything. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what I did to you and Emma. I convinced myself that you would be fine without me, that Emma was young enough to adjust. I told myself that I deserved happiness after 15 years of being the responsible one, the provider. Veronica left yesterday. When she found out the money was gone, she was gone too. Turns out she loved the lifestyle I promised more than she loved me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please tell Emma that I love her. I'll respect whatever conditions you set for seeing her, and I'll pay the child support, no matter what it takes. Robert. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Perhaps someday I would show it to Emma, when she was old enough to understand. But not yet. Chapter 5. The Rebuilding. The months following Robert's departure were both easier and harder than I expected. Easier because I had our money back. We could stay in our home, Emma could continue at her school, and I didn't have to worry about our financial future. Harder because no matter how thoroughly I'd prepared for the practical aspects, I hadn't fully anticipated the emotional aftermath. Emma asked about her father every day for weeks. When is Daddy coming home from his business trip? Soon became, why does Daddy only call on Saturdays? And eventually, does Daddy not love us anymore? Those questions broke my heart, but I was determined to protect her from the uglier truths. Daddy loves you very much, I would tell her. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and need to live apart, but that doesn't change how much they love their children. I arranged for Robert to have supervised visits twice a month in a neutral location with a family therapist present. He agreed to everything without complaint, seemingly desperate for any connection to Emma. To my surprise, he was punctual, sober, and engaged during these visits, bringing thoughtful gifts and listening intently to Emma's stories about school and friends. As for me, I threw myself into rebuilding our lives. I returned to work at the library with renewed focus, even accepting a promotion to Director of Research Services that I'd previously declined due to the longer hours. My parents helped with Emma when needed, and slowly we established a new normal. I also sought therapy for myself, working through the betrayal and its aftermath with Dr. Winters, a compassionate woman who never judged my elaborate revenge scheme. What you did was unorthodox, she told me during one session, but it came from a place of protection for yourself and your daughter. The question now is, where do you go from here? It was a good question. For months, I'd been so focused on survival and stability that I hadn't thought beyond the immediate future. What did I want for my life now? The answer began to take shape gradually. With my financial security restored, I started to explore possibilities I'd previously set aside. I enrolled in a digital security certificate program, fascinated by what I'd learned during my crash course in cryptocurrency and identity protection. The research skills I'd honed as a librarian transferred surprisingly well to this new field. 6 months after Robert's departure, I launched a small consulting business on the side, Bennett Digital Security Advisors. I offered workshops for small businesses and individuals on protecting their digital assets and identities. My first clients were fellow librarians and local business owners, but word spread quickly about the library lady who explains complicated tech stuff in ways that actually make sense. Emma adapted to our new life with the resilience only children seem to possess. She missed her father, but the regular visits provided stability, and she blossomed in other ways, taking up soccer, developing close friendships, and maintaining her straight-A average in school. On a crisp fall day, about a year after everything happened, I received an unexpected email from Diane, my former roommate who had helped me track down Robert and Veronica. Claire. Hope you and Emma are doing well. Thought you might want to know. I ran into someone interesting during a case. Last week. Veronica Walsh is back in the States, working as a cocktail waitress in Atlantic City. Apparently, her post-Robert relationship with an international businessman didn't work out either. Just thought you'd find it interesting. Drinks soon? Diane. I stared at the email for a long time, surprised by my own reaction. I had expected to feel some satisfaction at Veronica's downfall, maybe even vindication. Instead, I felt nothing. Or rather, not nothing. Just a calm acknowledgement that her story no longer had anything to do with mine. I typed a quick reply. Thanks for letting me know. Emma and I are doing great. She's the star of her soccer team now. Would love to catch up soon. How about dinner next weekend? As I hit send, Emma burst through the front door, her soccer uniform, mud splattered and her face glowing with excitement. Mom, we won the tournament. Coach says I might be team captain next year. I closed my laptop and gathered her into a hug, mud and all. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. That night, after Emma was in bed, I sat on our back porch with a glass of wine, looking up at the stars. I thought about the journey of the past year, from devastation to revenge, to this new, unexpected contentment. Robert had taken our money, thinking it would bring him happiness. I had taken it back, thinking it would bring us security. We were both right, in a way. But the real value hadn't been in the money itself, but in what I'd discovered through the process of reclaiming it. My own strength, resourcefulness, and resilience. I hadn't just recovered our financial security, I'd found a new version of myself, one who didn't need anyone else to feel complete or protected. The woman who had trembled on the kitchen floor, bank statement in hand, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who had faced the worst betrayal imaginable, and not only survived, but thrived. My grandmother would have approved of how I'd used her inheritance, not just the money itself, but the spirit behind it. She'd wanted me to find joy, not just responsibility. And somehow, through the most painful experience of my life, I had found both. Chapter 6. The Unexpected Turn. 2 years after Robert's departure, my life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Bennett Digital Security Advisors had grown from a side gig to a full-fledged business with 3 employees and a reputation that extended beyond our small Connecticut town. I'd scaled back my hours at the library to part-time to accommodate the growing client list. Emma, now 8, had fully adjusted to our new normal. She still saw Robert twice a month, and their relationship had evolved into something I couldn't have anticipated. A genuine connection based on who they were now, rather than who they had been to each other before. Robert himself had changed in ways that surprised me. After Veronica's departure, he'd moved to a small apartment in Hartford, taken a position at a less prestigious law firm, and, from all accounts, devoted himself to being a better father. He paid his child support on time, never missed a visit with Emma, and had even started attending a support group for divorced parents. I'd made peace with our past, or so I thought. until the day Emma came home from a weekend visit with a request. That caught me off guard. "Daddy wants to know if he can come to my soccer championship next Saturday," she said, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "He's never seen me play, Mom. Can he come, please?" I hesitated. Our carefully structured visitation arrangement had kept Robert and me in separate spheres, interacting only through lawyers and the occasional text message about Emma's schedule. The thought of sitting on the same bleachers, pretending to be amicable co-parents, made my stomach clench. But Emma's hopeful expression melted my resistance. "Of course he can come, sweetheart. It's your big day. You should have everyone who loves you there to cheer you on." Emma threw her arms around me. "Thank you, Mom. I'm going to call and tell him right now." As I watched her race to the phone, I wondered if I'd made the right decision. Could I really sit beside the man who had nearly destroyed us and make small talk about soccer strategies? The answer, it turned out, was yes, but not without difficulty. The morning of the championship game dawned bright and clear. Emma was a bundle of nervous energy, checking and rechecking her soccer bag, practicing footwork in the living room, and asking every 5 minutes if it was time to leave yet. We arrived at the field an hour early for warm-ups. I settled on the bleachers with my coffee, chatting with other parents and trying not to check my watch too often. 10 minutes before kickoff, I spotted Robert making his way toward the field. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking thinner than I remembered. When he saw me, he hesitated momentarily before raising a hand in awkward greeting. I nodded in acknowledgement, gesturing to the empty space beside me on the bleachers. It was the civilized thing to do, even if my heart was racing with a complicated mix of emotions. "Thanks for letting me come," Robert said as he sat down, maintaining a careful distance. Emma was so excited when she called. "She's been practicing extra hard all week," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "She's really improved since the beginning of the season." We lapsed into silence, both watching as the teams took the field for warm-ups. Emma spotted us sitting together and waved enthusiastically. We both waved back. "She looks happy," Robert observed quietly. "She is happy," I confirmed. "She's resilient." "Like her mother," Robert said, glancing at me. When I didn't respond, he continued, "Claire, I know we don't talk about what happened, but I want you to know that I think about it every day. What I did, what I almost threw away, what you did to stop me." I stiffened. We had never discussed the details of my elaborate deception, not even through our lawyers. "This isn't the time or place, Robert." "I know," he said quickly. I admire what you did. It was brilliant, actually, and I deserved it." Before I could respond, the referee's whistle blew, and the game began. For the next hour, we were just two parents cheering on their daughter, calling out encouragement and groaning in unison when shots missed their mark. Emma played brilliantly, scoring 2 goals and assisting on a third. When the final whistle blew, her team had won 3-1, securing the championship. She ran straight to us, sweaty and beaming with pride. "Did you see?" she gasped. "Did you see? My goals?" "We saw everything, sweetheart," I assured her, pulling her into a hug. "You were amazing." "Your mom's right," Robert added, high-fiving her. "Total soccer superstar." Emma looked between us, her expression suddenly serious beyond her years. "This is nice, you know, both of you being here together, not fighting or being weird." Robert and I exchanged a glance over her head. "Why don't we celebrate your big win?" I suggested. "Ice cream? My treat." "Can Daddy come too?" Emma asked immediately. I hesitated only briefly. "Of course, if he wants to." Robert looked as surprised as I felt by my offer. "I'd like that," he said carefully. "Thank you." And so we found ourselves at Emma's favorite ice cream shop, sharing a table and awkward small talk while our daughter happily devoured a banana split. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't the disaster I'd feared either. As Emma excused herself to use the restroom, Robert leaned forward. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you. I've been offered a position with a firm in Chicago. It's a good opportunity, but I'd have to move away from here, away from Emma." I stared at him, processing this unexpected news. "When would this happen?" "They want me to start next month," he said. "I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first." "Emma will be devastated," I said, my protective instincts flaring. "I know," Robert acknowledged. "That's why I'm torn. This job could mean a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my career. But being a 4-hour flight away from my daughter—" He trailed off, genuine conflict evident in his expression. "What are you asking me, Robert?" I said bluntly. "Permission to move? Blessing to abandon your daughter?" He winced. "I'm not abandoning her. I'd fly back for visits, bring her to Chicago during school breaks. But you're right to question my motives. After everything, you have every right to doubt me." Emma returned before I could respond, and the conversation shifted back to safer topics: her soccer triumph, end-of-year school projects, summer plans. After we finished our ice cream, Robert thanked me again for including him and said goodbye to Emma with an extra-long hug. As we watched him walk to his car, Emma slipped her hand into mine. "Is Daddy okay?" she asked. "He seemed kind of sad." I squeezed her hand. "He's got some grown-up decisions to make, honey, but he loves you very much." That night, after Emma was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, turning over the day's events in my mind. Robert's potential move to Chicago complicated everything. Would regular video calls and occasional visits be enough for Emma? Or would she feel abandoned all over again? More surprisingly, I found myself wondering about Robert's well-being, too. Not out of romantic feeling, those had died with his betrayal, but from a place of unexpected empathy. He seemed genuinely changed by the experience, haunted by his mistakes, and trying to rebuild himself. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent him a text. "We should discuss this Chicago situation properly. Coffee tomorrow?" His response came almost immediately. "Name the time and place. I'll be there." The Thou. Next morning, I dropped Emma at school and drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from curious eyes and potential gossip. Robert was already there when I arrived, 2 coffees on the table, mine prepared exactly as I liked it. "Old habits," he said with a shrug when I raised an eyebrow at the cream and 2 sugars. I sat down across from him. "Let's talk about Chicago." "I'm leaning toward turning it down," he admitted. "After seeing Emma yesterday, the thought of being that far away. What would the job entail?" I asked, surprising myself with my interest. "Corporate compliance law, helping companies navigate regulatory frameworks, ensure ethical practices." He gave a bitter laugh. Ironic, right? Me advising on ethics. "People change," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. "Do they?" Robert asked, studying me intently. "Have you changed, Claire?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course I have. How could I not, after everything?" "You're stronger," he observed, "more confident, building a business, raising Emma beautifully. But underneath all that, are you happy?" "That's not a fair question," I replied, sipping my coffee. "And it's not relevant to your job decision." "Maybe not," he conceded. "But I think about it. Whether what I did, what we both did, left any room for happiness afterward." I set down my cup, suddenly impatient with the philosophical turn. "Robert, here's what I know. Emma needs stability. She needs to know that the people who love her won't disappear. If you take this job in Chicago, you need to be absolutely certain you can maintain a meaningful relationship with your daughter despite the distance. And if I believe I can, then I won't stand in your way," I said firmly. "I'll help Emma. Understand? I'll facilitate visits and video calls. Because despite everything that happened between us, you're still her father. Robert looked genuinely surprised by my response. That's incredibly generous, considering our history. It's not generosity, I corrected him. It's pragmatism. Emma loves you. Keeping you in her life, in whatever capacity works, is what's best for her. And what about what's best for you, Claire? The question hung between us, unexpected and unanswerable. What was best for me? I'd been so focused on survival, then on revenge, then on rebuilding for Emma's sake, that I'd rarely stopped to consider my own happiness beyond professional accomplishment. That's my business, I finally replied. Robert nodded, accepting the boundary. Fair enough. I'll let you know my decision about Chicago by the end of the week. We finished our coffees with less tension than when we'd started, discussing practical matters about Emma's summer schedule and an upcoming school project. As we prepared to leave, Robert hesitated by the door. For what it's worth, Claire, the person I was when we were married, the one who took your money and betrayed your trust, that person wouldn't recognize me now, and I wouldn't recognize him either. I believe you, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Good luck with your decision, Robert. 3 days later, Robert declined the Chicago position. Instead, he accepted a partnership with a small firm in our town that specialized in family law. He bought a modest house 10 minutes from ours, and gradually, our strictly scheduled visitations evolved into a more flexible co-parenting arrangement. It wasn't perfect. There were difficult moments, disagreements about parenting approaches, the occasional reminder of past wounds. But there was also an unexpected peace in our new dynamic. A relationship built not on romance or even friendship, but on mutual respect for what each of us had survived and who we had become. Chapter 7. The New Beginning. 5 years after. The day I discovered our empty bank accounts, I stood at the window of my office, watching the October sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Bennett Digital Security had grown beyond my wildest expectations, with clients ranging from small businesses to mid-size corporations across 3 states. We now occupied the entire second floor of a converted Victorian in the center of town. Far cry from the corner of my living room where it had started. Emma, now 11, was thriving in middle school. A straight-A student with a passion for both soccer and computer coding, a combination that filled me with pride. She split her time between our house and Robert's in an arrangement that had become surprisingly natural over the years. Robert and I had settled into an amicable co-parenting relationship that occasionally verged on actual friendship. He had become a respected family law attorney, specializing in collaborative divorce, helping couples separate with minimal conflict and trauma for their children. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The business phone rang, interrupting my sunset contemplation. My assistant had left for the day, so I answered it myself. Bennett Digital Security, this is Claire. Ms. Bennett? An unfamiliar female voice came through the line. My name is Catherine Winters. I'm the CEO of Horizon Financial Services. We've had a situation. Your name was recommended to me by several colleagues. 30 minutes later, I had the details of a sophisticated attempt to compromise Horizon's client data and a new high-profile client. As I made notes on the case, my personal phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Emma wants both of us at her coding club showcase Thursday night. I can pick you up at 6 if that works. I texted back a quick confirmation, smiling at the ease of our interaction. Who would have thought, 5 years ago, that we could reach this point? That evening, as I prepared dinner, pasta with homemade sauce, Emma's favorite, I found myself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had led me here. The woman I'd been before Robert's betrayal, content in her routine, trusting to a fault, defining herself primarily as a wife and mother, seemed like a stranger to me now. The woman I'd become during my revenge scheme, calculating, determined, willing to do whatever necessary to protect what was hers, also felt distant, like a character I'd played in a high-stakes drama. The woman I was now contained elements of both, but was fundamentally different, stronger and more compassionate, ambitious yet grounded, fiercely protective but capable of forgiveness. The front door banged open, followed by the sound of Emma's backpack hitting the floor. "Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today." She bounded into the kitchen, all gangly limbs and boundless energy, launching into a tale about her coding club and an upcoming competition. I listened attentively, marveling at her resilience. Despite everything she'd been through, she was a happy, well-adjusted child with a bright future ahead of her. "And Ms. Rivera thinks our team could win state if we really nail the algorithm," Emma concluded, reaching for a cherry tomato from the salad bowl. "Oh, and Dad said he's taking me shopping this weekend for new soccer cleats. Mine are getting too small." "That sounds great, sweetheart," I replied, steering her toward washing her hands for dinner. "How's his new case going? The one he mentioned last week?" "Good, I think. He was on the phone with clients when he dropped me off. Something about mediation being better than litigation." She shrugged, the intricacies of divorce law understandably boring to an 11-year-old. As we sat down to dinner, Emma chattering about her day between bites of pasta, I felt a profound sense of contentment wash over me. This wasn't the life I'd planned, not even close, but somehow it had become the life I was meant to have. The next morning, I arrived at my office early to prepare for my meeting with Catherine Winters from Horizon Financial. As I reviewed my notes, my office manager, Melissa, the same friend who had helped me understand cryptocurrency during my revenge plan, knocked on my door. "Morning, boss. Your 9 a.m. is already here. Conference room B is set up." "Thanks, Melissa. Can you join us? I'd like your input on the technical aspects." As we walked to the conference room, Melissa lowered her voice. "By the way, that guy from the tech conference last month, Michael Collins, he called again. Asked if you'd reconsider having dinner with him." I shook my head, smiling slightly. "Still not interested, but thanks for the update." "Claire," Melissa sighed. "It's been 5 years. Not every man is going to be like Robert." "This isn't about Robert," I assured her. "I'm just busy. Between the business and Emma, I don't have time for dating." This wasn't entirely true, and Melissa knew it. The reality was more complicated. It wasn't that I didn't trust men anymore. I'd moved past that particular trauma. It was that I'd discovered a contentment in my independence that I was reluctant to disrupt. The meeting with Catherine Winters went exceptionally well. Horizon Financial signed a 6-month contract for comprehensive security services, becoming our largest client to date. As we wrapped up, Catherine lingered behind her team. "Ms. Bennett, Claire, I have to ask, how did you get into this field? You mentioned you were a librarian before?" I gave her the abbreviated version, former research librarian who discovered a passion for digital security after a personal experience with financial fraud. No need to share the full dramatic story. "Remarkable transition," Catherine commented. "We need more women in this industry. Would you consider speaking at our Women in Finance conference next spring? Your perspective would be valuable." I agreed, flattered by the invitation and excited by the opportunity to expand our network further. As Catherine left, Melissa raised an eyebrow. "See? Networking dinners you'll agree to. Actual dates, not so much." I laughed, waving her out of the conference room. "Get back to work, Ms. Thompson." Thursday evening came quickly. True to his word, Robert picked me up at 6 p.m. sharp for Emma's coding showcase. As we drove to the middle school, we discussed Emma's recent interest in competitive coding and the summer camps we were considering for her. "She gets her brains from you," Robert said as we pulled into the school parking lot. "Always has." "And her determination from both of us," I replied diplomatically. "Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Robert chuckled. Fair enough. The coding showcase was held in the school gymnasium, with teams of students demonstrating projects they'd been working on all semester. Emma's team had created an app that helped users track and reduce their carbon footprint, impressively sophisticated, for middle schoolers. As Emma expertly explained their algorithm to the judges, Robert leaned toward me. We did something right with her, didn't we? Despite everything. We did, I agreed softly. She's the best of both of us. After the showcase, where Emma's team took second place, we celebrated with ice cream, a tradition that had survived from the earliest days of our co-parenting arrangement. As Emma chatted excitedly about improvements for their app, I caught Robert watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. What? I asked when Emma went to the restroom. Nothing, he said, then reconsidered. Actually, no. It's something. I've been wanting to tell you this for a while. You're remarkable, Claire. What you've built, your business, your life, it's impressive. I'm sorry I didn't see your potential when we were together. The compliment caught me off guard. Thank you, I said simply. For what it's worth, I think the person you've become is someone to be proud of, too. It was true. The man sitting across from me, dedicated father, ethical attorney, humble and self-aware, was someone I could respect, even if I could never forget the pain his former self had caused. When Emma returned, the moment passed, but something had shifted subtly between us, an acknowledgement of how far we'd both come from our darkest moments. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected email from Diane, who had helped me track down Robert and Veronica years ago. We'd stayed in touch, meeting occasionally for dinner when her investigations brought her to Connecticut. Claire thought, you might find this interesting. Veronica Walsh got married last weekend to a hedge fund manager in Greenwich. Fancy affair at the country club. She's gone full Connecticut socialite now. Keeping her nose clean as far as I can tell, but I thought you might want to know she's back in your general vicinity. Dinner next time I'm in town? Diane. I stared at the email, waiting for some emotional reaction, anger, perhaps, or anxiety, at the thought of potentially running into the woman who had nearly destroyed my family. Instead, I felt only mild curiosity, the kind one might have about a character from a book read long ago. Thanks for the heads up, I replied. If I run into her at Whole Foods, I'll be sure to recommend a good financial security consultant. And yes to dinner. My schedule's open next month. I closed my laptop and went to check on Emma, who was working on a coding project in her room. She looked up as I entered, her face so like my own at that age, but with Robert's determined jaw. Hey, Mom, can you test my app? It's supposed to translate text into 3 different coding languages, but the JavaScript module is being glitchy. I sat beside her, marveling at how technology that would have mystified me at her age was second. Nature to her? Sure, show me what you've got. As we worked through the problem together, I thought about the email from Diane and the strange circularity of life. Veronica was back where she started, albeit with a different wealthy man. Robert had transformed himself into someone better than he'd been. And I had become someone I never could have imagined. Stronger, more successful, and paradoxically, more complete on my own. The money Robert had stolen, the money I'd reclaimed through my elaborate scheme, had been just money in the end. What mattered was what we'd all done with the experiences that money had set in motion. Got it! Emma exclaimed as her program finally ran correctly. See? It was just a syntax error. Well done, I told her, genuinely impressed. You figured it out yourself. I had help, she said, leaning against my shoulder briefly. I always have help when I need it. In that moment, I realized that of all the identities I'd worn, librarian, wife, revenge architect, business owner, the one that mattered most was the one that had remained constant throughout. mother. Everything else could shift and evolve, but that core purpose had guided even my darkest actions. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, looking up at the same stars I'd contemplated on that night 3 years earlier, when I'd first begun to feel truly at peace with my new life. The title of my story might begin with, "He took all our money for his lover," but that was just the inciting incident, not the defining moment. The true story was about what came after, the plan I'd executed, yes, but more importantly, the woman I'd become in the process. Tomorrow, I would meet with new clients, mentor my growing team, and continue building the business I'd created from nothing. I would help Emma with her homework, coordinate weekend plans with Robert, and perhaps finally respond to that dinner invitation from Michael Collins. The future stretched before me, open with possibilities, and for the first time, I was truly excited to discover what might come next, not as someone's wife or someone's victim, but simply as myself. Claire Bennett, exactly where I was meant to be. Epilogue. 3 years later, it was a perfect June morning when I pulled into the parking lot of what was now officially Bennett Security Solutions Inc. The company had outgrown our Victorian office space a year ago, necessitating a move to a modern 3-story building on the edge of town. The glass doors at the entrance bore our sleek logo, a stylized shield with a digital lock. As I walked through the reception area, I couldn't help but smile at how far we'd come. 27 employees now, clients in 12 states, a reputation as one of the leading boutique digital security firms in the Northeast. "Morning, Ms. Bennett," called Tara, our front desk coordinator. "Conference room is set up for the 9 a.m., and the team from Westlake Financial is already in the waiting area." "Thanks, Tara. Could you ask Melissa to join us with the technical specs?" I stopped by my office to collect my tablet and notes, pausing briefly to straighten the framed photo on my desk. Emma, at her 8th grade graduation 2 weeks ago, beaming in her honors sash with Robert and me on either side of her. She was 14 now, heading to high school in the fall with dreams of MIT or Stanford in her future. The Westlake meeting went smoothly, resulting in a signed contract for our most comprehensive security package. As the clients filed out, Melissa lingered behind. "Big news," she said, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "Remember that cryptocurrency monitoring system we set up last year? It just flagged something interesting." My pulse quickened. "What kind of interesting?" "A signature pattern we've seen before. The Henderson case from 2027. Same methodology, different target." The Henderson case had been our first major fraud investigation. A CEO who had systematically embezzled from his company using a sophisticated cryptocurrency scheme. We'd traced the money and helped law enforcement recover over $2 million. "Who's the target this time?" I asked, already mentally preparing for a deep dive into blockchain transactions. "That's the thing," Melissa said. "It's not a what, it's a who. The target appears to be Veronica Walsh Harrington." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. Veronica. After all these years, that name still carried a charge, though no longer a painful one. "Her husband's hedge fund is being systematically drained," Melissa continued. "Small amounts, redirected through multiple wallets. Whoever's doing it is good, professional level. But our system caught it because the pattern matches what we've seen before." "Have they reported it yet?" "No indication in any of the financial alert systems. They might not even know." I leaned back in my chair, considering the implications. The woman who had nearly destroyed my family was now potentially facing financial ruin herself. There was a certain poetic justice to it. "What do you want to do?" Melissa asked, watching me carefully. She knew the history, knew exactly who Veronica Walsh Harrington was to me. The Claire of 8 years ago might have felt vindication, might even have quietly celebrated this turn of events. The Claire of today felt something different, something that surprised me with its intensity. Call Greenwich PD's Financial Crimes Unit, I said decisively. Tell them we've detected a potential fraud pattern targeting Harrington Capital. Offer our assistance pro bono. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Pro bono? For the Harringtons? For the precedent, I clarified. This pattern is becoming more common. Being able to cite this case will help us with future clients. Melissa nodded, though her expression suggested she understood my true motivation had little to do with business strategy. That evening, as I prepared dinner, a task that had once been a domestic obligation but had evolved into a form of relaxation, after busy days, I considered calling Robert to discuss the Veronica situation. We had reached a point in our post-divorce relationship where we occasionally consulted each other on matters unrelated to Emma, a development that still sometimes surprised me. Before I could decide, my phone rang with his name on the screen. Claire, have you seen the news? His voice had the careful neutrality he used when approaching potentially sensitive topics. About Veronica's husband's fund? Yes, we actually flagged the fraudulent transactions this morning. Our system caught it. Ah, he said, and I could picture him nodding. That makes sense. The headline just hit the local news. Greenwich hedge fund manager reports suspicious transactions. I thought, well, I wanted to check if you were okay. I'm fine, I assured him, touched by his concern despite myself. Actually, we've offered to help with the investigation, pro bono. A moment of silence, then a soft chuckle. That's very you, Claire. The you of now, I mean. I'll take that as a compliment. It absolutely is. His tone shifted to something lighter. In other news, Emma informed me that her science project needs more storage space than my apartment. Can provide. Any chance your garage has room for a small hydroponic setup? I laughed. Define small? According to her, and I quote, just a few tables and some special lights and maybe a water pump system. Nothing major. Send her my way. We'll figure it out. After we hung up, I stood at my kitchen window, watching the sunset and reflecting on how easily we converse now, how we could even joke about shared challenges. It had taken years to reach this point, years of careful boundaries, professional communications, and gradually rebuilding a different kind of trust. The next morning, I drove to Greenwich to meet with the financial crimes detectives who had been assigned to the Harrington case. I'd decided to handle this personally, both because of the technical complexity and because, if I was honest with myself, I wanted to see this through. The Greenwich Police Department was housed in an imposing brick building that reflected the affluence of the town it served. I was escorted to a conference room where 2 detectives and a cybercrime specialist waited. Ms. Bennett? The lead detective greeted me, standing to shake my hand. I'm Detective Wilson. These are my colleagues, Detective Patel and Ms. Rodriguez, from our cybercrime division. Thank you for coming in. I laid out what our monitoring system had detected. The pattern of small transactions, the sophisticated routing through multiple wallets, the telltale signatures that matched previous cases we'd worked on. In our experience, I explained, presenting a series of blockchain diagrams on my tablet, this level of sophistication suggests a professional operation, not an opportunistic hack. Detective Patel leaned forward. Do you have any theories about who might be targeting the Harringtons specifically? We don't typically speculate on motives, I replied carefully. But in similar cases, the perpetrators have usually had inside knowledge of the victim's financial systems, an employee, a business associate, occasionally a family member. The conference room door opened and a uniformed officer leaned in. Sir, the Harringtons are here. Detective Wilson nodded. Show them in. My stomach tightened involuntarily. I had known this meeting was a possibility, had prepared myself for it, but still felt a flutter of anxiety as the door reopened. Veronica entered first, followed by a silver-haired man I assumed was her husband. 8 years had changed her, as it had all of us. Her once fiery red hair was now an elegant auburn, styled in a sophisticated bob. She wore the uniform of Greenwich Wealth, cashmere sweater, pearls, tailored slacks, and moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to deference. It took her a moment to notice me. When she did, she froze mid-step, color draining from her face. "Claire?" she said, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Veronica." I kept my tone professional, standing to extend my hand as if she were any other client. "I'm here representing Bennett Security Solutions. We detected the unusual patterns in your husband's accounts." Her husband looked between us, confusion evident. "You two know each other?" "We've met," I said simply, sparing Veronica the necessity of explaining our complicated history. "A long time ago." The meeting proceeded with an awkward tension that the detectives clearly sensed but professionally ignored. I presented our findings, explained the methodology we'd used to detect the fraud, and outlined potential next steps for the investigation. Throughout my presentation, I was acutely aware of Veronica watching me, her expression a complex mix of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Shock, certainly, wariness, and something else, a kind of grudging respect, perhaps. When the meeting concluded, the detectives asked me to stay behind to discuss technical details of how we could assist their investigation. As the Harringtons prepared to leave, Veronica hesitated by the door. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment, Claire?" she asked, her voice steadier now. The detectives glanced at me questioningly. "We'll step out for a few minutes," Detective Wilson offered. "Just knock when you're ready to continue." When we were alone, Veronica remained standing near the door, maintaining physical distance between us. "Of all the security consultants in the Northeast," she said finally, "we get the one person who has every reason to want to see me suffer." "That's not why I'm here," I replied evenly. "My company's monitoring system detected the fraud pattern. We're offering our expertise to help with the investigation. That's all." "Why would you help me? After what I did, what Robert and I did, to your family?" I considered the question seriously. "I'm not helping you, Veronica. I'm doing my job. The fact that you're involved is an uncomfortable coincidence." She studied me for a long moment. "You've changed." "We all have," I replied. "Life tends to do that. Robert and I—" She began, then stopped herself. "I assume you know he reached out to me a few years ago to apologize." This was news to me, but I kept my expression neutral. "Robert's actions are his own business now. He told me about what you did," she continued, "how you got the money back. It was impressive, terrifying, but impressive." I suppressed a smile at her choice of words. A mother will do what's necessary to protect her child's future. "Is she your daughter? Is she all right?" The question seemed genuine if awkward. "Emma's thriving," I said, allowing a hint of pride to color my voice. 14 now, brilliant at math and science, soccer team captain." Veronica nodded, looking down at her perfectly manicured hands. "I'm glad. For what it's worth, I didn't know about the college fund. I thought it was just marital assets." "It doesn't matter anymore," I said, and realized I meant it. "That was 8 years ago. We've all moved on." "Have we?" she asked, meeting my eyes directly. "If our situations were reversed right now, if you were the one being defrauded and I was the expert who could help, would you believe I'd actually try to help you?" The question hung in the air between us, unexpectedly thought-provoking. Would I have believed in her capacity for growth, for change, for professional ethics that transcended personal history? "I don't know," I admitted. "But that hypothetical says more about how well I know you than it does about either of our characters." She seemed to accept this, nodding slightly. "For what it's worth, thank you. For the help now and for not mentioning our history to my husband. He knows some of it, but not the details." "Your history is your own to share or keep private," I said. Now, I should get back to the detectives. We have work to do if we're going to trace these transactions. Of course. She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. You built all this yourself? Your company? Yes. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Good for you, Claire. Truly. After she left, I took a moment to collect myself, surprised by the complex emotions the encounter had stirred. Not anger or resentment, those had faded years ago, but a strange sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. The investigation into the Harrington fraud continued for weeks, eventually leading to the arrest of their financial controller, who had orchestrated the scheme with the help of an overseas hacking group. Bennett Security Solutions received extensive, positive press for our role in detecting the fraud and assisting law enforcement, leading to a surge in new clients. I never spoke directly with Veronica again, though I occasionally saw her name in local society pages or charity event listings. Robert mentioned meeting her once at a legal conference, describing the encounter as painfully awkward but mercifully brief. Life continued its forward momentum. Emma started high school that fall, diving into advanced programming courses and leading her soccer team to the state semifinals. My business expanded further, requiring another office expansion and the addition of a specialized cybersecurity division. And I finally said yes to dinner with Michael Collins, the persistent tech conference contact who had been asking me out for nearly a year. Our first date led to a second, then a third, evolving into a relationship that was refreshingly straightforward and drama-free. Michael was a widower with a college-age son, a software architect who understood my work and respected my independence. He made me laugh, challenged my thinking, and showed a genuine interest in Emma that never felt forced or intrusive. He's not terrible, was Emma's highest form of teenage approval after meeting him. And he actually understood my explanation of quantum computing, which is more than I can say for most adults. Robert was surprisingly supportive when I cautiously mentioned the relationship. You deserve happiness, Claire, he said simply. We all do. On a crisp autumn evening, almost 9 years to the day since I had discovered our empty bank accounts, I sat on my back porch with Michael, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, noticing my contemplative mood. I was just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns, I replied. 9 years ago, my world fell apart. I thought I'd never trust anyone again, never feel secure again. And now? He prompted gently when I trailed off. Now I have a thriving business, a wonderful daughter, and I smiled at him. Good company. It's not the life I planned, but it's a good one. Michael raised his glass in a toast to unexpected turns. As we clinked glasses, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for everything, even the painful betrayal that had led me to this moment. Robert's theft had been the catalyst that pushed me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed. My elaborate revenge plan had taught me resourcefulness and strategic thinking that now served me daily in my business. Even the painful aftermath had forced me to rebuild myself into someone stronger and more complete. I had taken all the broken pieces and constructed something better, something authentically mine. And that, I realized, was the most satisfying revenge of all. A new chapter. 10 years later, the Bennett Security Solutions headquarters buzzed with excitement. Employees gathered in the large atrium, champagne flutes in hand, as I prepared to make the announcement. Emma stood beside me, now 24 and officially our Chief Innovation Officer after completing her computer science degree at MIT. Thank you all for being here today, I began, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. 10 years ago, Bennett Security Solutions was just me, a laptop, and an idea. Today, we're a team of 83 across 4 offices, protecting the digital assets of more than 300 clients. Applause rippled through the crowd. Today marks not Just our 10th anniversary, but a new chapter in our company's story. I'm pleased to announce that Bennett Security Solutions is merging with Collins Architecture to form Bennett Collins Integrated Security. More applause as Michael stepped forward to join Emma and me. This merger combines our expertise in financial security with Michael's pioneering work in system architecture. Together, we'll offer solutions that no other firm in the industry can match. The celebration continued long into the evening, with employees and key clients mingling, sharing stories of past projects, and speculating about future possibilities. As I circulated through the room, accepting congratulations and answering questions about the merger, I caught sight of a familiar figure approaching. Robert. "Hope I'm not crashing the party," he said with a smile. "Emma invited me." "Of course you're welcome," I assured him. "It's a family milestone as much as a business one." Robert had aged well, his once dark hair now distinguished with silver at the temples. He'd maintained his law practice focusing on collaborative divorce, becoming something of a local authority on the subject. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm over the years, co-parents first, then gradually, cautious friends. "Quite a journey from that first little office above the bookstore," he commented, looking around at the sleek corporate headquarters. "You've built something remarkable, Claire." "We all have in our own ways," I replied. "Your practice is thriving too, from what Emma tells me." "It is," he acknowledged, though not quite as impressively as all this. He gestured to the bustling celebration. "Congratulations on the merger. Michael's a good man." "He is," I agreed, watching as Michael chatted animatedly with a group of engineers across the room. We had married 2 years earlier in a small ceremony with Emma as my maid of honor, and Robert surprisingly among the guests. "Mom!" Emma appeared suddenly, linking her arm through mine. "The tech team wants to demonstrate the new blockchain visualization tool for Michael. They need your approval before they hijack him." I laughed. "Tell them to go ahead. Just don't get too technical. We've got non-tech clients here too." Emma dashed off, her energy seemingly limitless as always. "She's so much like you," Robert observed. "The brilliance, the determination. With your persuasiveness," I added. "A dangerous combination." We shared a smile that acknowledged our shared history, the good and the bad, without needing to discuss it. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone for a moment, watching the remains of the celebration from a quiet corner. Michael had been pulled into an intense discussion with our development team. Emma was charming potential clients with her comprehensive knowledge of our systems. Robert was deep in conversation with our legal counsel about intellectual property protections for our new combined technologies, each of them playing roles in my life that I could never have predicted 10 years ago. Each relationship transformed by time and choices, some mine, some theirs. I thought about the day everything had changed, standing in my kitchen, bank statement in hand, world collapsing around me. The desperate plan I'd hatched to recover what was stolen, the woman I'd pretended to be, and the woman I'd ultimately become. The path from there to here hadn't been straight or easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if I was making the right choices for Emma and myself. But looking around at what we'd all built, separately and together, I felt a profound sense of contentment. The betrayal that had once defined my story had become merely the first chapter of a much longer, richer narrative. As if sensing my reflective mood, Michael appeared at my side, slipping his arm around my waist. "Happy anniversary," he said, softly. "Both business and personal." I looked at him in surprise. "You remembered." 2 years married today," he confirmed. "And 10 years since you started the company. Important milestones." What he didn't mention, what he didn't know, was that today marked another anniversary. Exactly 10 years since I had executed my elaborate plan to recover our stolen money. 10 years since I had transformed from victim to victor. "I have something for you," Michael continued, pulling a small box from his pocket. Not quite a traditional anniversary gift, but I thought it was appropriate. Inside the box was a small, elegant shield pendant on a silver chain, a miniature version of our company logo. "It's beautiful," I said as he fastened it around my neck. "I had it engraved," he told me. "Look at the back." I turned the pendant over to read the inscription. "From broken to unbreakable." My eyes met his, questioning. "You once told me," he explained, "that your life broke apart and you had to rebuild it stronger. That's what this company represents, taking something broken and making it unbreakable." I touched the pendant, deeply moved by his understanding. He didn't know all the details of my past, the elaborate deception I'd created as Alex Morgan, the calculated revenge I'd executed, but he understood the essence of my journey. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing he would understand all that those words encompassed. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and we'd returned home, I stood at our bedroom window looking out at the moonlit garden. Michael was already asleep, the day's excitement having finally caught up with him. I held the shield pendant in my palm, thinking about its symbolism and about the many forms of security I'd pursued over the years. Financial security, emotional security, the security of knowing who I was and what I was capable of. 10 years ago, I had been desperate to recover what was taken from me. I couldn't have imagined then that losing everything would ultimately lead to gaining so much more, not just materially, but in confidence, in purpose, in genuine relationships built on mutual respect rather than dependence or deception. Robert's betrayal had shattered the life I thought I wanted. My revenge had given me back financial security. But it was what came after, the rebuilding, the growth, the transformation, that had given me the life I truly needed. From broken to unbreakable indeed. The unexpected call. 12 years after Robert's betrayal, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I received a call that would once again alter the course of my life in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I was in my office at Bennett Collins headquarters, reviewing quarterly security assessments with our senior team, when my assistant interrupted with an urgent message. "Ms. Bennett, there's a federal agent on line 1. Says it's regarding a BIA case of national significance." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. In our line of work, federal attention could mean either a major opportunity or a serious problem. "I'll take it in my office," I said calmly, though my mind was racing through possibilities. Had one of our security systems flagged something beyond corporate fraud? Was one of our clients under federal investigation? Once alone, I picked up the phone. "Claire Bennett speaking." "Ms. Bennett, this is Special Agent Daniel Martinez with the FBI's Cyber Division. Thank you for taking my call." His tone was serious but not accusatory, which I took as a good sign. "What can I do for the FBI, Agent Martinez?" "I'm calling because your name has come up in connection with a case we're investigating. Specifically, your experience with a certain cryptocurrency recovery operation about 12 years ago." My blood ran cold. After all this time, someone had discovered what I'd done? Had Robert finally told someone the full story? Was I about to face charges for my elaborate deception? "I'm not sure what you're referring to," I said carefully. Agent Martinez's voice softened slightly. "Ms. Bennett, you're not in any trouble. Quite the opposite, in fact. We're dealing with a series of sophisticated cryptocurrency thefts targeting government pension funds. The methodology being used bears striking similarities to a case you were involved with, not as the perpetrator, but as the counter-operative, shall we say." Relief washed over me, immediately followed by confusion. "How do you know about that?" "That's classified," he replied. "But I can tell you that we've been building a database of financial security countermeasures for years. Your case stands out as one of the few successful recoveries of its kind." I remained silent, processing this unexpected turn. "Ms. Bennett, we need your expertise. Agent Martinez continued. The current thefts have already resulted in losses exceeding $30 million from state employee pension systems. We believe more targets are lined up. Our conventional approaches aren't working. What exactly are you asking of me? I questioned, still wary. We'd like to bring you in as a special consultant. Your unique perspective, someone who successfully countered a sophisticated cryptocurrency theft using psychological tactics rather than purely technical ones, could be invaluable. I thought about the implications. Working with the FBI meant scrutiny, bureaucracy, potentially having to disclose details of what I'd done all those years ago. But it also meant a chance to help others who, like me, had been victimized, though on a much larger scale. I'll need to consult with my legal team before agreeing to anything, I said finally. Of course, Agent Martinez replied. But I should mention, time is critical. Based on the pattern we're seeing, another major theft is likely within the next 2 weeks. We arranged a preliminary meeting for the following day, with my company's legal counsel present. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, staring out the window at the city skyline, my mind racing. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very skills I'd developed to execute my revenge, skills I'd later legitimized and refined in building my security business, were now being sought by federal law enforcement. My past deception might help prevent future victims from losing their retirement savings. But was I prepared to revisit that chapter of my life? To potentially have my actions from 12 years ago scrutinized, even if in service of a greater good? I called Michael first, explaining the situation as fully as I could. He listened without interruption, then offered his perspective. You've built a company dedicated to protecting people from financial fraud, he pointed out. If the FBI thinks your insights could help stop these thefts, isn't that aligned with your mission? It's complicated, I admitted. What I did to recover our money wasn't exactly conventional. But it wasn't illegal, he reminded me. You've had lawyers verify that multiple times over the years. He was right. In the early days of building my business, I'd sought legal opinions to confirm that my actions in recovering joint assets through deception didn't constitute criminal fraud. The consensus had been clear. Morally ambiguous, perhaps, but legally defensible. Next, I called Robert. Though our day-to-day communications now primarily revolved around Emma's occasional needs, he remained the only person who truly understood what I'd done and why. The FBI? He repeated after I explained the situation. That's unexpected. Tell me about it, I agreed. What do you think? Should I do it? A pause, then, remember what you told me years ago, when Emma asked if she could apply for that cybersecurity summer program that would take her away for 8 weeks? You said the question wasn't whether you'd miss her, of course you would, but whether the opportunity would help her grow into the person she was meant to be. The memory brought a smile to my face. I did say that. Maybe the same principle applies here? Robert suggested. Will working on this case help you become more of who you're meant to be? Or pull you back into a past that's better left behind? It was a thoughtful question, one that stayed with me through the evening as I prepared for the next day's meeting. Emma called that night, as she did every Tuesday. Now 26, she was completing her PhD in computer science while still maintaining her role at Bennett Collins, primarily working remotely from Cambridge. The FBI wants your help? She exclaimed when I shared the news. Mom, that's massive. Your own special agent, like in the movies. I laughed at her enthusiasm. It's more likely to involve conference rooms and PowerPoints than car chases and gadgets. Still cool, she insisted. And important. Those pension funds support real people. Teachers, firefighters, civil servants. That's one of the reasons I'm considering it, I admitted. What are the other reasons? She asked perceptively. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Emma was an adult now, and over the years, I'd gradually shared more details about what had happened between her father and me, though I'd kept the full extent of my deception vague. Part of me wants to transform what I did all those years ago, something born from pain and anger, into something unequivocally positive, I explained. To bring everything full circle. That makes sense, Emma said thoughtfully. It's like reclaiming the narrative, making your story about more than just what happened to you. Exactly, I said, once again struck by my daughter's emotional intelligence. The next morning, I met with Agent Martinez and his team at the local FBI field office. My company's general counsel, Sarah Chen, accompanied me, clipboard in hand and skepticism evident in her expression. Agent Martinez laid out the case in detail, a series of sophisticated attacks targeting public pension systems in 7 states, each following a similar pattern. Small amounts skimmed continuously, routed through complex cryptocurrency pathways, eventually consolidated in offshore accounts. By the time the thefts were discovered, the money was virtually untraceable. We've tried conventional cybersecurity approaches, Agent Martinez explained, gesturing to a wall of complex diagrams. We can see what happened after the fact, but we can't seem to catch them in the act or predict the next target effectively. And you believe Ms. Bennett's unique perspective might help? Sarah asked, carefully avoiding specifics. We do, confirmed the agent. Sometimes the most effective countermeasures come from thinking like the adversary, understanding not just the technical how, but the psychological why. Ms. Bennett has demonstrated that capability. Sarah and I exchanged glances. She'd been briefed on enough of my history to understand the reference without knowing every detail. What exactly would my role be? I asked. We'd like you to join our task force as a special consultant, Agent Martinez explained. Review the evidence we've gathered, help us understand the mindset behind these attacks, potentially develop strategies to anticipate and counter future attempts. And my legal exposure? I asked directly. We're prepared to offer limited immunity for any past actions you might need to disclose as part of this consultation, Martinez replied. Our interest is in stopping the current threat, not pursuing historical cases that resulted in no permanent financial harm. Sarah nodded slightly, indicating this was an acceptable assurance. After 2 hours of detailed discussion, I agreed. To join the task force for an initial period of 30 days, Sarah negotiated specific terms that would protect both my personal interests and those of Bennett Collins, including explicit confidentiality clauses. As we left the field office, Sarah gave me a sidelong glance. You know, when you hired me, 5 years ago, you said the job would be interesting. That might have been an understatement. I smiled. Would you have taken the position if I'd said, sometimes the FBI might ask for help with pension fund theft because of something I did in my past? Probably, she admitted with a laugh, but I would have negotiated a better compensation package. The next month passed in a blur of secured briefings, data analysis, and strategic planning sessions. I divided my time between running Bennett Collins and working with the FBI task force, often stretching my days well into the evening. Michael was supportive as always, picking up household responsibilities without complaint, and listening patiently on the rare evenings when I could share non-classified aspects of the case. The work itself was both challenging and strangely familiar. As I reviewed the evidence and helped the team understand the psychology behind the attacks, I found myself drawing on skills I'd developed years ago when planning my elaborate deception as Alex Morgan. What we're looking at, I explained during one particularly intense strategy session, is not just a technical operation. It's a confidence game at its core. The perpetrators aren't just exploiting system vulnerabilities. They're exploiting human psychology, organizational trust structures, and predictable reaction patterns. I helped the team develop a profile of the likely perpetrators, not basement hackers, but sophisticated financial professionals with insider knowledge and psychological insight, people who understood both the technical systems and the human factors that protected them. They're patient, I noted, pointing to the timeline of small transactions stretching back months before detection. They're not looking for a quick score. They're building infrastructure for ongoing extraction. That requires confidence, resources, and a long-term perspective. As we neared the end of the 30-day consultation period, we had developed a comprehensive counter-strategy that combined technical monitoring with psychological tripwires designed to detect the early stages of infiltration. The key is to recognize the preparatory phases, I explained to the team. By the time money starts moving, it's already too late. We need to identify the reconnaissance behaviors that precede the actual theft. On day 28 of my consultation, the system we'd designed flagged suspicious activity targeting the Texas Teachers Retirement System, one of the largest pension funds in the country. Our early warning indicators had detected precisely the pattern of preliminary probing we'd theorized would precede an actual attack. For the next 72 hours, I barely left the field office as our team monitored the situation in real time, coordinating with Texas authorities to set up a controlled environment that would allow the attack to proceed just enough to gather evidence while preventing actual funds from being compromised. The operation was successful beyond our expectations. Not only did we prevent a potential $15 million theft, but the evidence gathered led to the identification of a sophisticated criminal organization operating out of Eastern Europe with co-conspirators in 3 U.S. cities. As the case wrapped up, Agent Martinez called me into his office for a final debriefing. Ms. Bennett, I want to personally thank you for your contribution to this investigation. Your insights were invaluable. I'm glad I could help, I replied sincerely. The Bureau would be interested in maintaining a consulting relationship with you, he continued. On an as-needed basis, of course. Your approach to these problems is refreshingly different from our standard methodologies. I considered the offer. The work had been demanding but deeply satisfying in a way I hadn't anticipated. Using the skills I'd developed through my own painful experience to protect others felt like transforming something broken into something meaningful. I'd be open to that, I agreed, with proper parameters, of course. Of course, he echoed with a slight smile. Your attorney made those requirements quite clear. As I prepared to leave, Agent Martinez hesitated, then asked a question that caught me off guard. If you don't mind my asking, what made you decide to help us? You could have declined given the complicated nature of how you acquired your expertise in this area.